Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Today we have 3 stories for you, starting with one about the laziest rookie at work. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. The Spectre of the Dead Weight Lifer. In a previous life, I worked overnight in a hospital pharmacy. We were a skeleton crew on the night shift, and our work was pretty demanding. It was always with deep and constant frustration that we suffered through an assortment of weak coworkers who would underperform, shifting the burdens of their job onto everyone who didn't suck. After many and egregious proof that was virtually impossible to be fired, we had all come to the understanding that there was no hope if we ended up hiring a piece of crap. It was a dark and stormy night when loser McFwit was introduced as our newly hired trainee. She'd not been there a day, and I found a stash of medications I'd told her to put back. Not 5 minutes after she'd put them back, they were very poorly hidden, in a single pile, at McFwit's arm-height shelf in the closest aisle, barely out of eyeshot. I was honestly pretty amazed. It wasn't surprising to me that she hadn't done what I'd asked. She was preternaturally content sitting down, watching dust settle. No, what got me was the complete lack of stealth. You gotta give it the old college try and not have your bullcrap get noticed for at least the duration of your shift. I've witnessed virtuosos of stealth laziness where it can take months to realize they do almost nothing. We had lifers that just rolled like that. With loser McFwit on the job, we'd all be breaking our backs for the weak link. Oh, hell no. I mustered the troops and laid out the battle plan. We'd never get loser McFwit out if we didn't do something drastic, unprecedented even. In that meeting, we hatched the plan. To not train her. Here's how worthless she was. Piece of crap never even noticed. I didn't trust her to fill a single medication request. Anyone working the job fills tons of them on a slow shift. That's a lot of room for error. Sometimes errors kill or maim sick people. Can't have that. We started just not telling her what to do. Damn, that was easy. At the start of her second shift on the job, she seemed a little confused, but took to it like a natural. Who knew that you could spend an entire 10-hour shift on Craigslist and continue to do so for a month? I had a sneaking suspicion that the car she was eyeballing might be a little out of her price range. The week stretched on and on. The manager would ask if Miss McFwit was done training. Sorry, no, she still doesn't have it yet. Initially not a problem. It was a effing complicated job, so she stayed on the schedule. Training. Well, when training, you were an extra hand. Instead of scheduling 3 per shift, they scheduled 4. Eventually, economy took its natural course. My manager let her go, after asking me what was going on. I told her that we all refused to train her because she was the goddess of laziness, and we'd never be rid of her if we did. When I next saw my manager, she'd fired Loser and was amazed that Loser was blindsided. Not a clue that never being asked to do anything was the slightest bit off. So without a word in her defense, she skulked off into the sunset to go browse Craigslist for used Huffies. And our next story. My promotion to Bucket B. Years ago, my best friend B helped me get a job at an upscale restaurant where he'd been serving for a few years. The average 2-top ran about $50, so it was pretty decent money. The food was amazing, the people were mostly nice, and the boss was an a-hole. My boss, Kay, was probably about 20 years older and very conservative and judgmental about a lot of really little things. He was a former frat boy type, and he tended to be a lot more friendly with the preppier and sportier types he hired. Anything that identified a person as existing outside of the mainstream, though, was fair target for ridicule. For my part, I had strange pets, exotic piercings, unusual hobbies, and a penchant for cerebral and complex narrative media, whereas everything about Kay's sensibilities said that he was more of a dogs, sports, and sitcoms kind of guy. I'm not saying any of those things are bad or wrong, but I am saying that it's very likely that Kay and I would not have been friends if we'd been contemporaries. I have a strong feeling Kay would have seen to that. Here's one to give you an idea of the general flavor. I was getting ready to leave one night as Kay was holding court with a crowd of late-night regulars, and I put on my long navy blue overcoat and crossed past them. Kay said, "What are you supposed to be, the trenchcoat mafia?" The regulars at the bar all laughed at his witty and clever joke. The customers, like Kay, had ideas of popularity and success that had never been meaningfully challenged well into middle age. B, who'd been eavesdropping while wiping off the bar glassware, had been there a while, though, and he knew a bit more about the guests we entertained than I did. "Open it up for them," he said. I did, exposing the pattern in the lining, and they all flocked around me, saying things like, "Ooh, it's Burberry." That was literally the first time I had ever heard anyone even say Burberry. The coat itself was handed down by a friend who'd almost certainly stole it from a thrift store. The damage was done, though. Kay was visibly fuming at the shift in the attention of his adoring public. Another quick one. I have a couple of fake teeth from when I lost a few real ones in a skating accident, and before I got the crowns put in, I had a temporary composite, basically tooth bondo in place of my 8 and 9 incisors, my 2 front teeth. When the composite fell off and I had to save up to get it replaced, he took me outside and threatened to fire me if I didn't get the teeth fixed in a timely fashion because it's ugly and no one wants to see that. I understand that it was a fancy place and aesthetics are part of the package for which the customer is paying, but I feel that if the roles were reversed, I could have delivered the message without attacking anyone's self-esteem. Each day was composed of instances like that. He really didn't like me, but he knew he couldn't just fire me without it potentially causing larger issues for him. This is often the time when owners and managers tend to look for ways to make an employee's time at work so unpleasant that they decide to leave on their own. Usually this manifests as fewer hours, ignored requests for time off, and worse shifts or sections. But Kay decided to get creative. We had a drink bucket, which consisted of one bucket with a bunch of holes drilled in it, nestled within a taller bucket, the purpose of which was to strain out liquid waste, various drink leftovers from the solid waste such as fruit peels, toothpicks, straws, and straw wrappers, empty sugar packets, cherry stems, and snotty napkins from sick kids. If you work in food service, there's a good chance you know the bucket I'm talking about. One day, Kay caught me alone and said, "You're the bucket bee now. That bucket is yours. I don't want to see any employee other than you touching that bucket again." I said, "Yes, sir." He liked those little touches. In the coming weeks, I didn't exactly diligently tend to the bucket. I obsessively tended to the bucket. There was a fill line drawn in permanent marker on the inside of the bucket a couple of inches below the rim. A few inches below that was my imaginary fill line. If I saw anyone else even thinking about emptying that bucket, I would cross the kitchen and loudly condescend, "Hey, put that down. Kay put me in charge of the bucket. You don't really think you have what it takes, do you?" Well, Kay sure didn't. I basically did everything I could to make sure that everyone knew that Kay specifically told me to be the bucket's sole attendant, and that he was the sort of leader who did petty things like that if he didn't like a person's vibe, without ever expressing it as anything other than the highest honor. Every time Kay turned around, I was dumping that big orange bucket out or washing my hands, and after a while, everyone was in on it. We all treated that bucket like it was the most important piece of the restaurant's daily operation. If the slurry of coffee, tea, soda, water, and booze hit the fill line, somebody would come running and find me, and I would make it my next order of business. We treated it like an emergency. My buddy B even started acting a little more curt in his dealings with Kay, and when Kay finally inquired after the sudden shift in communication, B confided that he was jealous that, after years of loyal service, he wasn't even considered for the very important bucket work. Granted, the bulk of my work was still out in the front, and the dining experience on the guest end went largely unchanged, with the obvious exception being that the snippets of conversation wafting over from the back of the house had significantly more to do with buckets than it did your average fancy restaurant. At first, Kay was frustrated, but he didn't know what to do. Everyone was doing exactly what he told them to do. Eventually, Kay tried to get back in on the bit by elevating the title to Bucket Boy, and again to Bucket Man, and finally, inevitably, to Bucket Master. But no one laughed. It wasn't his joke anymore, and it had long since stopped being at my expense. That's how you turn a negative into a positive. Old saying, anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Good job on your entire team. And our last story. Don't want to pay for my work? Thank you for giving me your brand. This happened some years ago to my father. He's the owner of a prestigious law firm in my country, and he did a job for a very well-known company in my country and was owed about $2 million US. It seems like a lot, but it was well worth it as he defended the company for many times that in fines, and they would have gone bankrupt. After he finishes his work, the company doesn't want to pay him in that moment, but politely tells him to wait. A year passes by, and none of his calls get a response, but him being a smart man and a lawyer sees what he can do. The setup. My father sends one of his associates undercover with the company owner to befriend him. Important later. Then he calculates how much will they owe him with interest and all, and he just waits a few years to make interest grow. The associate he sent befriended the owner and tells him that he's a lawyer and has friends in the government. He told them he should deposit more money into the company's bank account as he knew there was going to be an investigation for tax evasion. In the country, he had his personal bank account as he had worked in that country in the tax collecting branch some years back and were already investigating him. And so foolishly, he actually deposited all of his personal accounts into the company's account. The revenge. His associate informs my father where the money is and then tries to contact them one last time, and they don't respond. In my country, if someone doesn't pay another after some time, they can do an embargo, which is basically taking whatever money he is owed, either in assets, furniture, money in the bank, etc. So with the interest, he's able to embargo the majority of the company's stores, and as the embargo is happening, he can't use his bank account as it's frozen. So basically, no lawyer because the bad word spread about him not paying. So with the majority of their stores now in my dad's name, their stock prices fell dramatically, and with the money my father got from the owner's bank account, basically bought the rest of the company about 70% off. The aftermath. The owner. Now the owner couldn't take his money from the company as that would be embezzlement, and if he told anyone that the money was his, he would get arrested for tax fraud, as part of it was used to try to keep the company afloat while they weren't getting any sales, so he basically became homeless. My dad. He now owned a famous brand and got it working normally after a few years, and his associate who helped him was now the CEO of the brand. So remember, kids, always pay your lawyers because they know better. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.